You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast, episode number 156. Description begins in the writer's imagination, but should finish in the reader's. Stephen King.
Broadcasting from a dark, windowless room in Hollywood when we really should be working on that next draft.
It's the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast,
Showing you the craft and business of screenwriting while teaching you how to make your screenplay bulletproof. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by Bulletproof Script Coverage. Now, unlike other script coverage services, Bulletproof Script Coverage actually focuses on the kind of project you are and the goals of the project you are. So we actually break it down by three categories: micro budget, indie film market, and studio film. There's no reason to get coverage from a reader that's used to reading tentpole movies when your movie's going to be done for $100,000. And we wanted to focus on that at Bulletproof Script Coverage. Our readers have worked with Marvel Studios, CAA, WME, NBC, HBO, Disney, Scott Free, Warner Brothers, The Blacklist, and many, many more. So if you need your screenplay or TV script covered by professional readers, head on over to covermyscreenplay.com. And today's show is also sponsored by the Heart Chart Screenwriting Masterclass taught by legendary screenwriter James V. Hart, the writer of Bram Stoker's Dracula, Hook, and Contact, to name a few. His unique story mapping system will teach you how to get your script ready for production and the marketplace. To gain instant access, head over to bulletproofscreenwriting.tv/heart chart. That's HART chart. Well, guys, today on the show, we have Rebecca Windsor. Now, Rebecca happens to be in charge of Warner Brothers writing and directing labs. And what these programs do is allows new writers and directors access to getting work inside of Warner Brothers in television. And it's been very mysterious over the years. I've heard about these programs for many, many years, and not many people know what goes on behind the scenes. How do you get in? What are they looking for? How do you submit? All these kind of things. So I wanted Rebecca to come on the show to discuss the writer's lab, but also the director's lab. So if you're a writer or a director out in the audience, this is an episode that you want to take a listen to. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Rebecca Windsor. I'd like to welcome to the show Rebecca Windsor. How you doing, Rebecca?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show. We have a history together because our kids used to go to school together, and that's how we met originally. And I think one day I realized, like, you said it in passing, I'm like, oh, I work at Warner Brothers. I'm like, wait, what do you do? And I think one day, like, I was walking my girls to school, and you like stopped me and like, you're famous. You're on the LA Times. So we discovered. I
just thought you were some guy that, like, I don't know, maybe worked in sound design, or I don't know. Like, I knew you were tangentially related, but like, I didn't know what you did. And then I saw you on the front cover of the LA Times, and I was like, oh my God.
Exactly. And my girl's like, why did she stop you? What's going on? And it was so funny. She's like, are you famous, Daddy? I'm like, no. I've got less than 5 minutes.
For the day you were famous.
For the day I was famous. Yeah. I did get a lot of emails that day. But we just recently ran into each other at the Austin Film Festival, which was also a pleasant surprise. I'm just walking around, I'm like, Rebecca. And it was... and
out of context, I'm like, I was like, what is your face doing in this like barbecue mixer? And then it was like, I put two and two together. Oh yeah, you moved to Austin last year. Of course you would be here.
Exactly. So, so after talking a bit, we're like, you got to come on the show, because I don't think anybody really knows the inside workings of what you do over at Warner Brothers, and the workshops and things that you are in charge of. But before we get there, how did we get started in this insane business?
I will try and tell the Cliff's Notes version, or
sure.
I don't know what the kids are calling it, the new Cliff's Notes. It's something else, right?
The YouTube video version, yes.
Yeah. So I grew up in San Diego from the time I was I mean, from as long as I can remember, I wanted to be an actor. I actually auditioned and got a call back for Punky Brewster, but did not get the role. But it was all I ever wanted to do. So I went to Northwestern and studied theater. And then from there, I moved to New York. I think, New York was always the dream of, go be a struggling actress. And, theater is much more important and prestigious than, coming to LA. And I think also in the back of my head, being from California, it just made the most sense that I, wanted to go to New York. So went to New York, spent most of my time working in restaurants and bars and, taking acting classes and, doing like really, really terrible student films and off Broadway black box theater, but really, was not making a living from it. And that was fine because I was young and I thought, I was living the life, and it felt like what I always told myself was, you just have to persevere. People stop pursuing acting all the time. And if I stick it out and I get the one job, then it'll just be a domino effect. Work begets work, and then, I'll have a career. So that was the plan. And then, after a few years, as I saw, it wasn't happening as fast for me. And also, you can't tell from Zoom, I'm 6 feet tall, so I'm not the most easily castable actor out there. I'm never going to be an ingenue. I think it was that, and looking at my friends who were also actors who I felt like were even more ambitious and more dedicated than I was. I mean, I was dedicated, but I also wanted to have a life, and then when I met my now husband, I think that was the real thing where, it's one thing when you're, 22, 23, and you think about buying a home and getting married and having kids. Those are hypothetical things that will happen at some point in your life. But when I met my now husband, I made those things a little bit more tangible as something that could happen soon. And so I think it was hard for me to sort of say out loud that I don't want to pursue acting anymore. And so I kind of, I just kind of kept going through the motions, even though I don't think I ever stopped wanting to act. The passion is still there, but it's just the life of an actor, as you may know.
Brutal.
It's not the easiest.
Brutal.
And I'm too, I don't know, type A, too, kind of career oriented to, I think that business part of it, and the fact that so much is out of your control as an actor, that you have to wait for someone else to give you a job, as opposed to you're a filmmaker, you find a way to make your films, or you're a writer, you can write. No one has to give you the opportunity, but as an actor, someone has to give you the opportunity. And it just felt I had no control over it. So anyways, all of that, combined with, I think, New York running its course for me. I love living there, but it's pretty, tough place to live. And I always felt the pull to come back to California. So we got married, we moved back to California. Then it felt like, okay, now I have to start out acting again in a brand new city, find new management, all of that. It just felt like a insurmountable, rock being pushed up a hill. And so my sister-in-law, who does not work in the industry, but is a very smart lady, said to me, listen, you can go back to acting in 6 months, or you can go back in 20 years. But if there's anything else you want to do, you should probably start thinking about it now, because you're getting older and you're going to have to start out at the bottom and work your way up, and it's going to get harder the older you get. So I thought those were wise words.
Very wise.
I started reading, I don't even know if they still have it, but there used to be the UTA job list that would come out every week.
Oh, yeah.
That listed, assistant jobs and internships and things like that. So I got an internship back when you could still get unpaid internships, not for college credit, because I'd already graduated college. So I got an internship at a feature production company and learned about development. And the light bulb in my head went off, where I was still able to use that creative muscle that I, was using as an actor, but, working with writers and, making scripts better. So it still fulfilled that drive and that, desire and that passion, but hopefully with more of a career path. So had the internship. Everyone there said, go work at an agency, even if you don't want to be an agent. So I went, I got a job at a literary agency called Broderweb, Chervin Silverman, which was a boutique agency that was small, but represented on the TV side people like Shonda Rhimes and Chuck Lorre and Don Belisario, who created NCIS. So like they were a powerhouse in TV. And I went in thinking, no, I want to work in features. Like that's the sexy job. But the only desk that was open was a TV agent. So I thought, okay, fine, I'll just take it for a couple of months and then move on to a feature desk when it opens. But so I get on the TV desk, and this was like the first renaissance of TV. Like my first year there was the Friday Night Lights pilot, and you had, obviously like Sopranos and Lost, and like, starting to be this like really like this wealth of really amazing content. So I think it was that, like, seeing that the quality was there. And then also, as I learned how the businesses work, I realized that I really like the television business, and I like the cyclical nature of it. Again, that like type A sort of structured brain that I have.
Well, I mean, this is the one thing that so many people coming up don't understand is like feature films are sexy. That gets all the splash. But where people really make money is in television. And people don't think about that. And now, thank God, there is such an amazing renaissance in the creative of television. And I mean, pretty much started with The Sopranos. It kind of, David pretty much crashed the door open. And then everybody just started doing this amazing work, from Breaking Bad to Mad Men and so on and so forth. But people still, because the sizzle, the Oscars are a lot sexier than the Emmys. And it's just the way, but smart people in the business, television and like television directors do very well, whereas feature directors are struggling to put. I just talked to a feature director the other day who will remain nameless, who's like, I've been nominated for Oscars, and I have to do commercials to make ends meet, because it's between job after job, and he doesn't do like giant jobs that are paying him obscene amount, but he's very well known and he's still very, very well respected. I was like, that's the world we live in. That is, that is the world we live in. It's not the 80s anymore.
100%. And, and I can talk about this a little bit, later, but, I have found just in the last several years, as I talk to, indie film directors and sort of try and like sell them on the director's workshop and all of that. And when I was first having those conversations like 6 years ago, I'd get a lot of, okay, sure, I'll think about it. And you could tell they were like, why would I ever do TV? To now, people are like, oh my God, there's this, episodic directing. Like, yes, I really want to do that, both for, I think, sustainability, like you said, just like making a living. But I think, again, TV is a little bit sexier than it was before. So I think people's minds are open to it. So
you know what's sexy though? That check.
The check is very sexy. Yes. For sure. Not living hand to mouth, like in a tiny little studio apartment is sexy.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you early in your career, you got to work with or assist Mr. Todd Lieberman, who is a very well-known producer who's done a few movies, not many, but he's done
quite a few. Yeah,
he's done quite a few films. What was the biggest lesson you took away from working with Todd?
Well, I think, the lesson, I don't know if it's specifically with Todd, but it's with that company, which is Mandeville Films, that he runs with David Hoverman. And they, have made like a lot of really big movies, and, very successful feature producers. The lesson that confirmed for me is I don't want to work in features. And I took that job, after having worked at the agency, and sort of at the agency, I was like, okay, I want to be a TV executive. And then I interviewed with Todd, and I, always take the meeting. And so I'm like, okay, I'm meeting the president of this big feature company. I'm never going to get it. And then he hired me, and I thought, okay. And he told me in the interview they were hiring a TV executive. So I thought, okay, if I'm working for the president, I will have my hands in everything. And so, yes, right now it's mostly features, but the TV, their TV side is growing too. So that's sort of why I took that job. And I'll get to your question in a second, but while I was there, it's just, it's even for a successful feature company, it took them several years to get their TV business off the ground, which is now very successful. But at the time, it was still like 90% of what I was doing was features. But so, yeah, I mean, again, having the 2 and some odd years that I was there, we made 5 movies, which is, pretty unheard of for, production companies these days. And even still, it was, the pace, we had movies that were, had opened offices in pre-production and were like 4 weeks out of production, and then just like fell apart, and things that were in development for years and years and years, and then things that would fall apart and then would come back 5. And I was just like, I can't deal with that. Like, I want to know that I'm working on something, and then and it's either moving forward or it's dead. I don't want to spend 5 to 10 years, hoping that this project goes.
Right. Yeah. That's not the way television works generally. They don't.
No. And then I think for him, Todd is, he's so smart. It was really like a masterclass in being with a studio producer, being able to listen in on his calls and hear how he navigated tricky situations, and how when he would get in the middle of, I don't know, like an argument or like having to deal with a situation, being able to like be that mediator and make each person think that he was on their side, and fully supported them while he had to sort of navigate all those politics. It was pretty impressive. So I think that, and also just his taste and his the amount of work that he did. He's a workaholic, and that's what made him so successful so young.
Right.
It's pretty intense at times, but yeah, he just has a drive like no other.
Now, you also got a chance to work at a little startup film festival called Sundance. You worked.
I take all the credit for its success.
Obviously, it was you and Bob all the way. Now, you worked over at the Institute, correct?
Yeah.
What did you do for Sundance?
So there's, the Sundance Film Festival, and then there's the Sundance Institute, which runs the festival. So the festival is obviously the public-facing part of it that everybody knows about. The Institute is a nonprofit, and it is dedicated to supporting independent film artists in various mediums through a lot of different programs. So I was in the feature film program, which was like the narrative side. There is a documentary side that is very successful. They have New Frontier, which is like VR and AR and transmedia, so they have a lot of different things like that. So within the feature film program, they run labs. So there is Episodic Lab. The Episodic Lab we started while I was there, but the ones that have sort of been around forever were the Screenwriters Lab and the Directors Lab. And again, like the people who came through that are people like Quentin Tarantino and and Ryan Coogler and Damien Chazelle and Chloe Zhao. And it's just like, it goes kind of on. And I always love, like, one of the stories that I heard from way back when was one of the first projects that they had in like the very early 80s was a screenplay called 3000. That was,
that's the Pretty Woman. Isn't it the Pretty Woman? Yeah.
The Pretty Woman. Yeah. But like when it went through the lab, it was like a dark drama about a hooker and, with like a not happy ending.
Oh, yeah.
I Pretty Woman. But, again, and like Taika Waititi and like all these people who just, like the history and the legacy of what they've done is pretty amazing. So the labs are their talent pipeline programs. People apply to them and the goal is, trying to find filmmakers who on the director side of it, they have to be first time feature director. So they have to have made shorts. Or they have to, done some work. And on the screenwriter side, I think you're allowed to have had one feature credit. I might be wrong.
That's a writer.
Years.
Right.
But how do you take these independent artists who have, and it's project specific, so it's not just, we're letting you in. It's we're letting you in and we're supporting you to try and get this film made. And they are very intense labs that take place at the Sundance Resort, which is a little bit outside Park City. There are like 4 to 5 day labs, and it's sort of like boot camp in the best and the most intense sense, like a creative boot camp where they bring in advisors again, like the top writers and directors in Hollywood and a lot of alumni who come back to act as advisors, and you're assigned advisors who have read your script, and then you do these like 2-hour note sessions, with, again, these like, ridiculously talented professionals who are trying to just give you ideas and help you make the best version of your film. And then you take all of that and go away and, then the next version is like the kitchen sink version, which is pretty terrible usually. And then you just sort of like let it marinate and see what are the things that what were the common themes among all of the feedback that I got that is worth incorporating. So there's that sort of creative process. And then post-lab, Sundance is really involved in just helping you try to get your movie made, even though as a nonprofit, they don't produce it, they don't finance it. It's it's a lot of, networking. How do we make connections?
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
So if you need to find a producer or an executive producer,
right.
There's a lot of those people in their the Sundance extended family. So trying to find you those people, like what can Sundance do to help you make your movie? If it's introductions to financiers, if it's introductions to casting directors, editors, whatnot, and then also kind of again continuing helping to develop the script. And then ideally, hopefully you got to make your movie and it comes out and all that.
So that's a pretty cool. Yeah, I've heard of the legends of those labs. I've talked to a few people who've gone through them, and it sounds like summer camp, but for filmmaking. And it's like and you've got like insane ass actors who just show up and they're like workshopping your idea and stuff like that. Yeah. It sounds amazing. Look, it sounds amazing. I think
if anybody can get in, it is like the best experience. And the other thing I will say about Sundance is that I know probably from the outside it sometimes can feel like very elitist or insular or whatever. And it's the opposite of that. The people at Sundance that I work with are the most dedicated to the mission of supporting,
filmmakers,
independent artists who are just trying to get their $500,000 movie made. So there's a lot of sacrifices that are made, because the people who work there believe so strongly in it. So it really is a family of sorts, in the best sense.
Now I have to ask you, because I found out during my research that you worked with an actor. I worked at his production company, Mr. Samuel L. Jackson, the legendary icon. Yeah. That's Samuel L. Jackson. I gotta ask, what's it like working with Sam?
It was awesome. He's amazing. I would say like the first time he ever came into the office, and this was the job I had before Sundance. The first time, obviously he's very busy, so it's not like he's coming into the office every day because he's off making movies and stuff, but still very involved. But I remember the first time he came into the office, and at the time I was still an assistant, and he was meeting with my boss in the one door over, but the door was open, and I'm sitting there typing and doing my work and stuff, but I can hear him, and it's just like you're hearing Sam Jackson's voice, and you're just like, this is so weird because it's like the voice is so iconic, But then I also remember another time he came into the office. It was like a year later, and our offices was on the CBS Radford lot in Studio City, and right next to the lot is a Subway, sandwich place.
Yeah.
And he walks in carrying his Subway sandwich bag to eat, and I just kept thinking what did the sandwich maker he was working in Subway for making minimum wage, and Samuel Jackson comes in, asks for his sandwich, and he's making it
and he's probably make me a mother effing no.
Yeah. But no, what I will say about Sam is so nice and down to earth, obviously very cool and all of that, but really, really smart also. The great thing about that job is, sometimes with these talent production companies, actor driven pods, it's a vanity deal. It's someone, is just oh yeah, I want to make TV or whatever. And it was never about that for Sam. I think it came from the fact that he just was a voracious viewer of television and was really passionate about producing it and creating and being responsible for putting great TV out there. And it was the best version of that kind of a company where he trusted my boss and I and our extensive TV experience to sort of advise him on why this might work and why this might not, but also use being Sam Jackson to our advantage if it helped. So, would go to the network pitches so we could try and sell the project in the room. And he would give notes on material. And again, his notes and his feedback were always so spot on because he's worked with the best filmmakers out there. So he knows story, he knows character. But, if he had a note and you said, oh, that's not going to work because X, Y, or Z, he was great, moving on. I get it. So it was a really wonderful experience. And it was just, I think the biggest disappointment was that we just never got anything on the air, which happens with production companies sometimes.
Of course.
So,
yeah, it takes a minute. Now, as a side piece of trivia, since you brought up the CBS lot, I don't know if you knew this or not, but my wife and I actually owned an olive oil and vinegar gourmet shop for 3 years, and we were on Ventura Boulevard in Studio City, right by Laurel Canyon, and our back door opened up into CBS. So,
what was your shop?
It was called originally Ferrari Olive Oil.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It was right out there, and don't get me, it was a dark time in our lives. We're talking about like 9 years ago, 8 years ago, something like 7 years ago, something like that. And it was right there at CBS. So I used to actually get who is it? Brooklyn Nine-Nine always had to shoot in the back lot, right in our street. So the location guy's like, hey, we're going to be shooting here. I'm like, well, you're going to have to pay me because you're going to disrupt my business. They're like, I know. So they would just pay off everybody. Just even if it was like 2 blocks away, we're like, hey, you're disrupting business.
I think we must have just, because I left, I stopped working at CBS in May of 2012. So we must have
just missed. Like we overlapped like 6 months maybe.
Okay. I would have gone there. I love.
Yeah, no, we had some good, we had a lot of celebrities that would come in and buy for the holidays and buy for their offices and things like that. But it was a different life. It was a lifetime ago. But I just thought, because everyone listening knows, everyone they always ask me when they meet me, did you really have an olive oil store? I'm like, yes, it's a long, dark story of times where I was burnt out by the business.
Makes sense. It can happen to the best of us.
It happens to the best of us. Now, but so now currently you're working for Warner Brothers in the development, in the workshop. What exactly do you do with Warner Brothers now?
So I run the writers workshop and the directors workshop. So 2 talent pipeline programs, kind of similar to what Sundance does with their labs, but focused on television. So one is for aspiring TV writers, and one is for aspiring TV directors.
And do they just and they just submit? Like it's just an application process?
They're both of them are application based. So I guess just easier to talk about them one at a time. So with the writers workshop, the application is open the month of May. We ask for a spec of a show that's on the air, which I know specs are a little bit out of fashion. But we do it for a couple of reasons. One, that is the job of a staff writer, is you have to write in your showrunner's voice. So for us, if we're reading a spec of, Mrs. Maisel or Stranger Things or whatnot, and it doesn't feel like the show, you have failed the assignment, and you wouldn't get, you would be fired if you were working on a show and can't capture it. So, and I think also, original pilots are very tough, and it's sometimes hard, to do like an apples to apples comparing material. But if we have sort of a bar of where we know a show is meant like to be, then we can, and also because we have such a high volume of applicants, we get like 2,500 submissions. So to get through that material quickly, and again, we're using like Mrs. Maisel as an example, like, okay, which are the ones that, do not feel like the show? Okay, those are easy passes. And then, go back and say like, hey, which are the ones that really stand out? So we get through that. And then if you advance to the next round, then we would ask for an original pilot, or it can be a screenplay. It can be a play. Just some original material, because it is important to us to see what your voice is as a writer, and then from there we interview a smaller group of candidates, which is very important because TV writing is a communal experience. So it is very important that we know that you are an okay, cool, chill person that can sit around for 10 hours with a bunch of people.
So the best advice I've ever gotten, and this is the advice I always tell people. What advice do you have for me working in the business? I go, the biggest piece of advice is just don't be a dick. And that is so valuable. And if you could just sit in a room with someone for 8 hours and not want to kill them, that sometimes trumps talent, because you might have 2 people who are equally talented. Maybe the other one's a little bit more talented, but if he or she is rough to work with, I always go with the person I can.
Yeah, it's like, the showrunner's putting together a dinner party. Like, who are the people that they're going to want to be with? And yes, like, don't be a dick is like obvious. I mean, not that it's still worth saying. But beyond that, it's I mean, we look for more than that. I mean, there are people who are not dicks, but like, don't, maybe are a little socially awkward, like they're nice people, but you're just like, or they're just so introverted that they just, and I get everyone has nerves when they come in. So there's a lot of that. And there's also just, we're looking for that, like, that spark, the je ne sais quoi of a person that's, memorable, whether it's in talking about why they write what they write, what drew them to writing. We want to feel passionate about championing these people, because I then have to put my name on the line when I try and get them staffed, and I'm sending them to showrunners. So it is a reflection on me. So I really need to stand by them. So it is, there's no exact science to any of it. But it's, it when you meet that person and you go like, oh yeah, they are ready. It's a little bit of that. So, so from the 2,500 people, we pick 8.
Oh, Jesus. That's almost as bad as Sundance. No, Sundance is much worse. That's like 30.
It's a little similar. Yeah. And then the program, and I should say, like, you need to be in LA for this. We are actually back in person this year, which is really great. We're using the same protocols that the studio is doing for writers' rooms. So everyone is vaccinated, masked, and tested and stuff like that. But so it's very exciting to be in person. But you do have to be in LA. We meet one night a week so that people can have their, day jobs if they're writers, assistants, or whatnot. We meet from October through March. And a lot of the workshop is focused on everything else that you need to know to be successful beyond the writing. Maybe we'll work on their writing, but again, it's so competitive. So if you've gotten in, we acknowledge you're a talented writer. But there are so many other factors that, and things you need to learn that are like the soft skills of being in a writer's room.
So what are a couple of those soft skills?
Yeah. So we bring in, showrunners and executives. We do everything from a class that's just an overview, like a macro level overview of how the business works. And then we do a lot of other classes. So like we will do a class on interviewing. How do you prepare for a general meeting with an executive versus you're meeting a showrunner to get a job on their show? We do a class on going to set. Oftentimes the writer of the episode will be sent to set to produce the episode, and they act as the proxy for the showrunner. So you're a first-time staff writer, and you go to set, and how do you interact with the episode's director if they're maybe not getting the things that your showrunner wants? What do you do when the actors don't want to say the lines? And sometimes you can call your showrunner. Sometimes they're not available. So really trying to see what's expected in that situation. We do an improv class to get writers to think on their feet and not censor themselves. So often in a writer's room with younger writers or newer writers, there's so much pressure put on themselves to pitch something perfect that's going to save the episode, and it may not land. And then you just like sit there beating yourself up, going like, idiot, I shouldn't have said, and then you get in your head and then you don't keep pitching. So we want to take that pressure off. Know that no one's judging you. They're judging their own bad pitches that didn't land, and just keep going. We do like a group writing exercise, because oftentimes a lot of shows, especially when they're under the gun and behind schedule, will kind of Frankenstein a script together. They'll just say, you 2 writers are doing act 1, you 2 writers are doing act 2, and so on and so forth. And then you have to put it all together and make it cohesive. So we do a lot of those kinds of exercises. We talk about difficult rooms. We have sort of a cone of silence class where we hear from some people about some of the challenges they've faced in challenging rooms, and how do you manage, how do you get through it, how do you find allyship, when is it time to leave, do you speak up, do you not? So those are those kinds of classes. And then we also do a simulated writer's room, which is like where we get into like the actual sort of writing work, and everyone is assigned a spec of a show to write. And then they have to hit the deadlines that are expected in a real world circumstance. So they come in and they pitch their story area for their episode. Okay, in the A story, this is happening, in the B and the C. And they have to, write that. And then the next week they turn in their beat sheets. The next week they turn in their outlines. They write their script over Christmas break, and then they have 1 week to revise. So we're looking to see if those writers can write strong material quickly under pressure. But also, we have everyone in the class read each other's material before they come into class so that we can act like a writer's room. Because it's one thing to say, do this, don't do that. And it's another to put it into practice and see if someone is talking too much and not giving anyone else any space. Or someone had a good idea and then got really long-winded and should have stop talking 3 minutes ago. Or I can tell someone has something to say, but they don't want to say it until it's perfectly articulated, at which point we've probably moved on. So, it's just learning how to give feedback in a collaborative, positive way and take feedback in a non-defensive way, and then be able to incorporate it into your material.
So then that's the writer's workshop, which all sounds fantastic. If you want to be a television writer.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can get
a lot of successes. Yeah.
If you could be one of the 8, I mean, that's pretty awesome. Now the directing side, how's that work?
So it's similar in philosophy of taking, directors who have not directed episodic before. So they come from indie film or commercials or music videos or whatnot. It's different in a few important ways. I think the biggest distinction, and the reason for the distinction, is that breaking into episodic directing is maybe the hardest thing to do in the industry, even if you've made features, because if you're a writer and you get your first job as a staff writer, you are one of many writers on a staff and you're low man on the totem pole. So you're not expected to do the heavy lifting and save the episode. You're just there to pitch ideas and keep the conversation going. But as the director of the episode, you are the captain of the ship. So there is reluctance from a lot of showrunners to give their $5 million episode over to someone who hasn't done TV before. So that's where we step in, is to kind of mitigate that risk, if you will. So it's also application based, and the application will be open. I think it's January 7th to February 6th coming up. To apply, you just need to upload up to 3 pieces of material, and then personal statement and whatnot. And the other difference is in the selection process. So we will review everyone's material, decide who we're really excited about, meet the finalists. But at the same time, we also start talking to our shows and identifying which shows are open to a first-time director. We have several that are really supportive. They've had success with previous directors out of the program, so they're likely to say yes. And then we also have many shows that are not supportive because, for one reason or another. I mean, we do a lot of big superhero shows and genre, things with action and stunts and green screen that not every emerging director has in their portfolio. But anyways, once we've identified the shows that will support it, we would then matchmake and send each showrunner 3 directors material and have them watch the material, have the showrunner meet them. And if there's one out of that group that they want to support, they let us know, and that gets them into the workshop. But by doing so, the showrunner is also guaranteeing them an episode on the upcoming season. And the reason we do that, and it means that obviously not as many people get in because we've sent them 3 directors, they're only picking one. But it's really important to us to not just be a shadowing program. There are several directing talent, pipeline programs around, and they all have value, but some of them only offer shadowing, which is a great learning experience. But we really wanted our workshop to lead to work and be a pathway. And so less people get in, but those that get in know they have a job waiting for them.
So how many submissions do you get, and how many actual directors get work?
So we get less submissions than the writers workshop because, as you imagine, it costs money to direct things. So not 2,500 people may not have lots of material. So I would say it's usually around the 500 mark, depending on the year. And in terms of how many people get in, it changes year to year because it depends on how many people we get episodes for. I would say the average is between 6 and 10. But again, it changes year to year. Again, COVID threw us into a tizzy. We didn't do it last year. It was, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the coming year. And then the workshop itself is a 9-week masterclass that we do end of May to end of June. It's taught by 2 directors, Bethany Rooney and Mary Lou Belli, who have over 300 episodes between them, and they've written a book on episodic directing, which is on our website.
What's the name of the book?
It's called Directors Tell the Story.
Oh, God, I got to get them on the show. I got to get them on the show.
You should. It's a really great book. Listen, I didn't go to film school, so I don't know, I don't know lenses. I don't know any of that stuff. And so it's a very approachable book. It's not a dry technical book. There's a lot of anecdotes. And what the book does is take you from prep through post, what is the process of episodic directing. So we use that book as our curriculum. And again, the class is not directing 101 because everyone that's gotten in, we've watched their material, we know they're talented. It's really about how is the medium of TV different, and what do you need to know to be successful?
And you have to be in LA for this as well.
And you have to be in LA for this, yeah.
Yeah, got it.
But it's a shorter span of time. So we have had people who just like get an Airbnb for a month or so, you know.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And so part of the class, like the first few classes are lecture based, again, using the book, just kind of talking about the nuts and bolts. You show up on day one of prep, what to expect. You go into a concept meeting, who's running it? What do you expect to know? What do you need to start thinking about? The questions that are going to be asked of you. When you go on the tech scout, these are the people who are going with you. In the tone meeting, you know, with the showrunner, you know, that's your last opportunity to have certain conversations. So kind of breaking down that whole process. We'll also have a script that we're working off of for the duration. It's usually, some TV show that one of them has directed in the past. So everyone will have homework of blocking and shot listing and doing all the creative prep you would normally do with, character intentions and obstacles and themes and motifs. And then we spend the last several classes putting scenes from that script on their feet. So we work on one of our sound stages and bring actors in for the day. And then every director gets a chunk of time to work the scene and get it to where they want it, in blocking and in performance. And then they will get feedback from Bethany and Mary Lou on a technical level. How was your blocking? Do you feel organic? Do people get boxed into a corner? It was really weird. Was there more movement? And then how was your coverage? Did you get all the shots you needed to? Did you miss anything? Did you cross the line? Is there possibly a more efficient way to get what you want by combining these two shots that's going to save you time in your day? And then they will also get feedback on a creative level. How are you collaborating with your actors? The trick in TV is that episodic directors are freelance. You're a guest director. And so you kind of go from show to show. So you go to a show that they may have been working together for years. So it's not your cast, it's not your crew. They know their roles better than you. So how do you find the balance between being the captain of the ship and the leader and knowing what you want, making your days, having a plan, having a vision, but at the same time being flexible, and in the case of the actors, you may have, figured out the blocking in such a way that's going to fit your shot list. But if your actor's instincts tell them to do something different that still works for the scene, but means you have to change your shot list, are you able to be flexible on the fly? You don't want to move them around like chess pieces and have them feel like you're just this dictator. So we work on all of those kinds of things. And then at the end of the workshop, we would arrange a time for those directors to go shadow on the show they're going to be directing. So they get to know cast and crew ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And then they direct their episode and then they're off to the races. That sounds, again, amazing. If you're a director out there listening, I would definitely suggest you submit to both of these programs. Now, you obviously have, over the years, have read a few scripts from young writers. What is the biggest mistake you see young writers make? Oh, my God. There's so many. I mean, okay, so really simple one is proofreading,
grammar.
Those are the worst. If you're bad, if you have tunnel vision, just give it to someone, give it to a friend, it just shows sort of lack of,
professionalism,
lack of effort, thank you, professionalism. But I think, sort of creatively, I see a lot of, on the 1 hour side, with say genre shows or any sort of world building show, two things. One is that you want to set up your world really quickly and really cleanly. So I know the rules and I understand it. And then it's just the window dressing. And then you get into your characters, because it doesn't matter if we're talking Game of Thrones or we're talking, any other sort of big show. We're not watching it for dragons, right? Or maybe some people are, but we're watching it for
the characters and
the emotions, the relationships, right? And so a lot of times you're either the world is not set up clearly enough, and I'm going, wait, I don't understand. There's two universes, and that kind of a thing. I don't want to have to ask questions, or all it is world building, and all it is set pieces and action and genre.
Yeah, there's no plot or character, right? There's no plot or character, right. Yeah, because look, we've all seen dragons. We don't show up, We've
all seen vampire shows, but the reason they keep making them is if you have a specific point of view and a different way of doing a vampire show that's really captivating, it can be successful. But if not, like, who cares?
Yeah, we've seen vampires, and we've seen vampires done very, very well.
Yeah.
So we don't. Yeah, it's not just about I guess, when did vampires really start kicking back up? I mean, 90s, 80s.
Well, there was Interview with the Vampire, which was, I think, like mid 90s.
Yeah, and Lost Boys and Near Dark and that kind of stuff back in the 80s. But it was kind of like specifically with something like vampires. It was novel back then. Yeah. And like, ooh, a vampire script. Now it's like, really another one.
Every day.
You've gotta really take it to another place. Now the same question goes for directors. Have you seen a lot of director samples and things like that?
Yeah.
Is there something that you see constantly from young directors who submit that you're like, they just don't understand this part, or they did this wrong? Things like that.
Yeah.
Or even even after they get into the program, even maybe they're extremely talented as directors, but they don't know how to work the crew. They don't know how to work the set. They don't know how to work the politics of it all.
Yeah. A couple of things. I mean, I think so. I have a threefold answer.
Okay.
One is, again, a little similar, like it's a little similar to the writer things, the style over substance, like something that's like looks really cool and it's got visuals and it's got all this stuff, but has no soul to it. Again, I want it to look good, but I, again, am watching it for the characters. I think in terms of applying, and this is not a mistake that directors make, but it's more of just a challenge by virtue of what we do at Warner Brothers, that there are sometimes really talented filmmakers whose films just feel too tiny, too indie, and I can see the value in them, but not every producer can. They can be a little myopic if it's just like, like quiet little dysfunctional family drama set in like 1920s Kansas in one house and whatever. And it's like great performance, but there's no scope to it. I think, again, it's not a mistake. It's just sort of knowing, okay, if you're applying to Warner Brothers and look at the shows that we're doing,
right.
there's often going, and it's not to say you need to have like action sequences in your material, but I think thinking about cinematic quality, visual style, all of that can go a long way.
But you got to play to your audience. Like, who is my customer here when I'm submitting stuff? If Warner Brothers is my customer, I'm not gonna give him the little indie shot in one room unless it's it has to be at a level that is so good that you just like, holy Jesus. But if you could show off a little bit of scope, like we could put them on The Flash. We could put them on one of those shows.
And that's why we ask for 3 samples. So if you have one sample that is super tiny, but like your performances are just like amazing, and then you have another sample that shows, maybe you're a commercial director, either branded content, it's really like slick and stuff like that. That's great. So we know that you can do that, and you can do that. And then I guess the third piece of advice, which I think is more for writer directors in particular who, come from film and are used to, that auteur driven, I am the sole creative voice on this.
Sure.
That doesn't work well in TV because in TV, it's a writer's medium. The showrunner is king. So while, yes, you are, like I said, the captain of the ship of this episode, you are servicing another master. And so I think, when I hear about, a particular director on their first episode, or maybe it's not their first episode, but who just like did not work well with the crew and was sort of, was not collaborative. That's something that I always tell people. It's like, if you're going to get into this, know that you are not that. Yes, you bring ideas, but ultimately it's not your decision. But having said that, I think there are a lot of benefits to indie directors working in television. Sustainability, of course, and like making a living. Like you go, like if you get like 3 to 5 episodes in a year, that takes up like 3 to 5 months, and then you've made enough money to live, and you can go spend the other part of your year working on your passion projects. But I think equally important is that what you get to do as an episodic director is go from show to show, and that means you're directing a lot. A lot of feature directors get to direct once every couple of years if they're lucky. For a film.
Oh yeah.
You're honing your craft, and you get to continue doing it, and you get to work in different genres with different casts and crew with different toys. So everything you're doing on the episodic side is going to make you better director on your own project.
Now, you also you travel to a bunch of different festivals and markets and things like that. And I have to believe that you have been, because I've been approached this way. So I can only imagine once they find out who you are, they're like, Oh my God. Can you talk for everyone listening, how not to approach someone in the business if you're just like that, with that desperation that I call it kind of a cologne that we can smell, kind of like Jakar in the 80s.
Yeah.
You could just smell it. And it's so off-putting and it's so unprofessional in the way you do it. It's like, I just met you. Hey, can you make my dreams come true? I just met you. You don't know me. What do I need to do for you to make my dreams come true? And that's generally not the way to approach it. So can you explain maybe a horror story that you have and how you should approach someone like yourself at these events?
Well, actually, there was like one of the most awkward interactions I've ever experienced happened at Austin Film Festival. Although this wasn't exactly that, but we were at a different mixer, and I was standing with two of my friends. One's a writer, one's an executive, and we were talking about a mutual friend. And this girl just kind of came into our circle. I was like, and like laughing along with us, like she was like part of the conversation. And she's like, wait, who are we talking about now? And it was like, and she didn't introduce herself, and she just sort of like inserted herself in a very, very awkward way, and didn't have an ask of us, which I will, like I was happy about, but we were just sort of like, we didn't know what to do. Like very
so
neurotic energy. And she was like, oh yeah, I thought you were talking about this movie. And we're like, no, we're talking about a friend of ours. Okay, but like didn't pick up on, like, it's like reading the room, right?
Right.
So that was very weird. But yeah, like there are people who just, I think in general, most people that I have experienced, or at least when I meet them at a festival, are respectful, especially like if I'm leaving a panel and someone's like, oh, I just saw your panel. I don't want to take too much of your time. I just had a quick question. I'm happy to do that.
Sure, of course.
All the time. So I think it's really just, or like at the Driscoll Bar, which is like the hotel that everyone hangs out with at the end of all. It's like from 4 p.m. till, the wee hours, everyone's just sort of like hanging out, which is great. And again, happy to have those conversations, but it's like recognizing if you see someone that you want to talk to, and they are like in a deep conversation with someone, maybe not the best time to butt in. Like find your moment, right? And then again, if we're sort of in a more social, relaxed atmosphere, just be mindful that we also just like, we're happy to have conversations, but we also want to like take a break from time to time. So I think it's just, being really respectful of people's time. Most people I know, including myself and my friends, are happy to give advice and ask,
Sure.
And then there are times where someone will say, like, because I don't work in development, so someone will say, like, oh, can I send you my pilot to see if Warner Brothers wants to make it? And I'm like, I don't do that, Oh, well, can you send it to someone? And again, like, then that requires like me reading it and putting my reputation on the line. And, and there have been times that I will send a person or a piece of material, but I think having that ask come in that way, like, puts me in a weird position sometimes.
Right. And also that ask from somebody you don't know. Like if you've built a relationship with them, you might know their work, or you might like all that kind of stuff. It would be a little bit different than someone just walking up to you and like, hey, here's my script. Can you go hand it to Samuel L. Jackson? Like, like it's, and that's where a lot of people, hopefully people not listening to the show, everyone listening to the show would not know not to do this, but a lot of times I've seen, look, people send me material. Like, can you help me produce my movie? I'm like, no. Do you not know who I am? That's not me. That's not what I do. And at events or festivals, some people are like, hey, I know that you interviewed, Edgar Wright. Can you get this script to him? I'm like,
oh my God.
I'm like, dude, no. Like, even if I could call Edgar up on the phone, which I can't, I wouldn't do that because it's the exact same thing. I've got to read it. I've got to it makes, come on.
Yeah. And, listen, I have a lot of sympathy for,
of course,
for aspiring writers and directors, and it's especially when they are not in New York and LA, because I think it does. Even in New York and LA, it can feel insurmountable, but you generally may have some connections here or there. But, again, when you go to festivals, you get people from all over the country and world who just are like, how do I do this? I don't know how to figure it out. So I do have a lot of sympathy and want to be helpful. But I think, to your point, it's yes, like if you are trying to break in as a writer or director, like do your research and figure out strategies and not just like cast a wide net to every person that you have ever come into contact with.
Yeah, the shotgun approach doesn't really work. You got to be more, you got to be more surgical. Yes, and do your research, do your homework. Don't pitch somebody who does comedy a horror script. Like that's
right.
This is 101. But it's a lot of people. They're like so desperate. They're like, well, you're in the business. I want to get into the business. You're my opening. You're my way in.
Yeah.
It's just weird. But I wanted to put that out there for people listening because I think it's a service that we need to do for young people coming up. Because I don't know about you, but when you were starting out, I was starting out. I literally bought cases of that Desperation Jacquard and I doused myself with it. And anytime I would go to an industry party, you could literally just smell the desperation on me. So I know what it feels like to be on the other side of that. And that's why I'm so like, that's why one of the reasons I do the show, to educate people about, don't do that. It doesn't work.
Yeah. You're doing God's work.
I'm doing the best I can. Now, where can people go to submit to both the television writers workshop and the directors workshop?
So we have a website which has all like so much of what I talked about and more. And, you know, as I mentioned, for the writers workshop, we have you have to write a spec to get in. We have a list of accepted shows because it's not every single show on air because that'd be impossible, but it's a really comprehensive list. And we will update it by the first week of January based on what's been canceled and what we need to add. So that's on there. On the directors workshop side, we also have a list for shorts filmmakers. So like if you've made a feature, no problem. But if you've made a short, we have sort of like the top, 100 shorts, like Academy qualifying shorts festivals. We just want to make sure people are not submitting, films that they made on their phone, unless they're Sean Baker. So that is on our website, which I need to pull up.
Well, you don't have to give it. Go ahead. Go ahead. Okay. I'm going to put it in the show notes anyway, but go ahead.
Okay. It's televisionworkshop.warnerbros.com.
Fair enough. And
there's like a contact us button. So if you just have like a general question that, that I haven't answered, it goes, someone will answer that.
And all right, now I'm going to ask you a few questions that I ask all of my guests.
Okay.
What advice would you give a filmmaker or screenwriter trying to break into the business today?
Ooh. I think if it is the only thing that you want to do, and I say this again as like a recovering, like struggling actor.
recovering struggling actor.
So, if there's anything, which is like, I don't mean to be like your parent, like if there's anything else you want to do, do it. But if you know that this is your goal, you have to find a way to keep doing it. So if you're a writer, it's even easier. Like you just keep writing. You have to, and if you, if you can find like a writer's group, just a couple of friends or colleagues that can keep you disciplined. So, I know writers need deadlines. So if you're meeting once a month and you have to have a new draft or you have to have a revision or you have to have a pitch, you just have to keep doing it. Even if you have a script that has been very successful and gotten you lots of meetings, that's only going to work for a couple of years. And, 3 years later, people are going to want new material for you.
Sure.
So I think you have to keep writing. And then directing, yes, you still have to keep directing. It's so much harder, I know, because it costs money. It costs a lot of money to direct stuff. But if that's what you want to do, you have to find ways to do it. And whether it's through, branded content or whether it's, commercials or, I don't even know how else you find ways to direct. But again, if that's your goal, you have to keep working at it. It's the only way to, again, hone your skills. And people are going to want to see new material. Like, I don't want someone applying to the director's workshop with something they made 10 years ago. I want to see that you, not have something that's super dated, but also have the drive. This is your passion. And this is the only thing you want to do in your life. You've found a way to make it work. Fair
enough. What is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
Don't compare yourself to other people's paths.
Yes.
And I still struggle with that from time to time. even as I, made the switch from acting to going the executive path. My path was very zigzaggy. You know, I had friends that I started out at my first agency job with who got a job working for, you know, X producer or whatever. And that person became their mentor and they just like championed them and they skyrocketed. And now they're like running, you know, departments and stuff like that.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And for me, I never had that. You know, like I said, I ended up at Mandeville Films, even though I knew I wanted to work in TV, but I was like, no, I'm going to work at this feature company and work for the president. And then worked at a TV pod and we just didn't get anything made. And then went to Sundance, which like none of it sort of makes sense, if you will. And if like one other job had come along or I didn't accept something and waited, maybe my path would have been quicker, you know, because several of my friends had much faster rises than me. And it was always so frustrating. Like, why is it taking me so long to get ahead? You know, why can't I work for the boss who's going to promote me? But having said that, when I got this job at Warner Brothers, it was the culmination, and it was like all of my different experiences, having worked at Sundance running a talent pipeline program, having worked in TV before, made me the perfect person for that job, and made the job perfect for me. So hindsight's 2020, you know, and don't compare yourself to other people. And especially if you're a writer or director, it's even, you know, there is no one right way to go about doing it. So just trust that you're, you know, on the right path and keep working and it'll happen.
Now, what 3 pilots that every television writer should read?
Oh, God.
I know there's different genres, but just generally.
I mean, the Friday Night Lights pilot, I think, was just so perfect. I mean, I hate to say like Breaking Bad and Mad Men. That's what everybody says, you know.
But it's true.
But they're great pilots.
The Wire, Sopranos. I mean,
yeah, Dexter was a great pilot.
Lost was a good pilot too.
Lost was a good pilot. I'm trying to think if there's anything more recently. I think The Great is a great pilot. I don't know. There's so many.
Okay, that was good. We listed a bunch of them off. And lastly, 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Oh my God, it's like choosing among my children. Let's see. Princess Bride.
Genius.
Heathers.
Oh, so good. Heathers, that's our generation, though. That is so our generation.
Yeah, I know. Oh, man. What's the third? Oh, my God.
I mean, it's not going to be on your gravestone, so you could just kind of...
No, I know. I'm like, do I go with like one of those movies that you could just like watch over and over and over, or something that's like important? Something like Citizen Kane and Seven Samurai. Right, exactly. Schindler's List, right?
Right, exactly.
One of the best movies of all time that I never want to see again.
Right, exactly.
I don't know.
That's so true. There's some movies that you watch once, you're like, I'm good. It was fantastic. Yeah. I never want to go down that road again.
I think the one like that fits that bill the most is Requiem for a Dream.
Oh,
I saw that movie and I was like, I don't know what I just saw. It was brilliant, and I can't get those images out of my head ever. But I
remember Pi. When I saw Pi too, I was like, I loved it. I don't need to see Pi again. Yeah. Like it's just like there's just an intensity there, but.
But I'm failing you. I'm failing you on this third movie, so I don't know. Clue.
Clue.
Clue. I love Clue.
Oh my God, Clue! Please, everyone listening, go watch Clue. The great Tim Curry,
Madeline Kahn, and Madeline Kahn.
Oh my God, Madeline Kahn. And I wish a studio would have the cojones to do what they did with Clue and release 3 different
versions
endings in the theater at the same time. So people were like, well, this is how the movie ended. No, it didn't. It ended this way. And there would be
go back. Yeah.
Oh my God. It was such a brilliant marketing move. Why hasn't anyone done that again?
I don't know. Sorry, can I amend it? Can I say one more, which again,
Sure.
that I think is like one of, again, they don't make movies like this anymore.
Sure.
Goonies.
Oh,
It's just a perfect adventure film with children that, you know what I mean? Like there hasn't been a movie, like obviously we have kids the same age, and it's like, I wish that there was a movie like that for them. I don't think that there is like something smart and fun and not like
it's
childlike.
tough. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to find stuff like that anymore. I mean, and now we're sounding like the two old farts in the room. You're like, back when we were kids. Back when we were kids.
What have I seen recently? I don't know. I really like The Favorite.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. But Rebecca, thank you so much for being on the show. I truly appreciate you, the work that you're doing. God's work. You're bringing new artists into the world and hopefully giving them ways to make a living in this insanity that we call the film industry. So I do appreciate everything you do, and thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to thank Rebecca so much for coming on the show and pulling back the curtain on the Warner Brothers Writers and Directors Television Labs. I truly, truly appreciate it, Rebecca. If you want to get links to anything we spoke about in this episode, head over to the show notes at bulletproofscreenwriting.tv/156. And before I go, guys, I have been working on a very big project coming out that will help build the tribe even more. Keep an eye out. It should be coming out in early 2022, and I will probably be announcing it very, very soon. So just keep an ear out for that, guys. Thank you so much for listening, guys. As always, keep on writing, no matter what. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast at bulletproofscreenwriting.tv.